Welcome into 5 Wide Fantasy. Today, getting into Week 10, the waiver wire, some must-add players for you guys. I have 5 for you. This week, we got some juice, and I think you know why. A player we'll definitely get to shortly here in this video, but if you guys are new to the channel, we'd really appreciate if you did hit that subscribe button. We have fantasy football content coming to you every single day. If you enjoyed today's video, we'd really appreciate it as well. If you hit that like button for me, let's not waste any time. Let's get into these players. First up, we're going to start with the Chargers here. As the time of recording, the time I'm putting this out is before Monday Night Football. So if anything changes, maybe I'll drop it in the comments, or I'll have some updates out on the 5 Wide TikTok and the YouTube Shorts page as well. So be sure to follow us there. But let's start with Quentin Johnston, who's 33% rostered right now. Josh Palmer heads to IR, which is a huge blow for this Chargers offense. Losing 2 of their top 3 receivers by the midway point of the season is less than ideal. Look, Palmer will be back at some point, but missing the next 4 weeks is a huge blow for this Chargers team. And Johnston now getting a major opportunity because his route participation competition is really poor. We're looking at Darius Davis, another rookie out of TCU. We're looking at Jalen Guyton, who's returning from a torn ACL from last season. He was just activated coming up into this Monday night game. And Simi Fehoko, who was obviously some free agent acquisition, formerly with the Dallas Cowboys. Now, last week we saw 66% route participation for Johnston, which is solid, which is good for what we've seen so far from him this year. Now we're going to see him as the entrenched wide receiver 2 in this offense, and that's going to lead to his route participation getting closer to that 80% mark likely. We're going to see some 12 personnel from this Chargers offense. I guarantee you're going to see Donald Parham. You're going to see Gerald Everett on the field a fair bit more. The Chargers, though, they can't run the football. They're one of the worst rushing offenses in the league. They're 28th in EPA per rush. They're averaging less than 4 yards per carry. The rushing offense just is not there. And we saw it last season. It was under a different coordinator in Lombardi, Joe Lombardi, now with Kellen Moore. We've just seen the team get completely away from it. And that's likely what we're going to see as the season goes on. They're throwing the ball a ton right now. Over 36 times per game, which is 8th in the NFL. For Johnston, he's going to run his routes pretty much exclusively for outside. So far this year, it's been around 80%. 20% of his targets have come for 20-plus air yards, so not too bad. Decent depth of target here for him on the season. But he has 0 receptions of 20-plus air yards, so that needs to be something that develops into his game, is his downfield play, which he was a great asset in for TCU last season and needs to come into the fold here for the Chargers. So the opportunity is there for him, and the late season opportunities in terms of matchup are also there, even with Palmer back. If Johnston can find a way to get involved here for this offense, he's got 2 matchups against the Broncos in the final 4 games, and then the Raiders and the Bills. Those are all teams that have not been great against the pass and against fantasy wide receivers so far this season. So the upside is there. We always talked about Johnston as a player to invest in the long term and not in the short term. But now he has immediate opportunity that if he can't take advantage of in the next 3-4 weeks when Palmer is out, he's an easy drop. But I'm not looking to invest a ton of FAAB to get him, but he's available in a lot of leagues right now, so I would be looking to take the flyer on him and see what happens. It's probably not an immediate start, but let's see what we get from him. I want to stick with the Chargers here for the second option at the tight end spot. We're going to go with Gerald Everett. He's 31% rostered right now. Look, a lot of the conversation here is going to be the same as to what we talked about with Johnston. The tight ends are going to become more involved in this offense. I guarantee you of that. You're going to see more 12 personnel. That's going to lead to Gerald Everett continuing to be on the field a ton, as well as Donald Parham. And Parham, obviously, a big week last week without Everett finding the end zone, 4 receptions for 43 yards. That absolutely gets it done at the tight end spot. And for Everett, he was the tight end 14 last season in fantasy points per game in half PPR formats. So he is someone that can prove to be fantasy relevant, even with Williams, even with Keenan Allen, even with Josh Palmer in the fold. When these guys are out, though, like I said, Everett is the more proven guy to go to in terms of pass catchers amongst this offense behind Keenan Allen. Like, yes, Johnston's got the upside. He's the first-round pick. He's going to get the opportunity to be on the field. Everett, though, is a reliable option for Herbert to get the ball to that is proven capable, not with just in his time with the Chargers, but with the Seahawks as well, to have explosive performances. Donald Parham has been pulling away some of those touchdowns from him with 4 on the season, a lot of those red zone opportunities, which is definitely unfortunate for Everett, but we should see him on the field more consistently now with these injuries. And honestly, even running routes and being on the field more in that wide receiver type of opportunity as opposed to, chipping in and playing at the line of scrimmage, getting in as a blocker. This should be a lot more running routes from the slot than we see him running routes in line. So I'm excited to see what Everett can do with the opportunity because, again, this is a good passing offense with Justin Herbert, quarterback that can produce and cannot run the ball, so we know the volume will be high. I'm willing to take the chance here on Everett if I'm struggling at the tight end spot. Now we move to some non-Chargers players. I want to talk about Zay Jones. He's 19% rostered. He's going to be someone that, if he's on your wire, which he is in over 80% of leagues, he's going to fly under the radar because he's missed considerable time here with this knee injury. The Jags are coming off their bye, so there's nothing really to go off of in recent weeks. So he should be someone you can get very, very cheap. And he's really, really intriguing from the sample size we've gotten this season and then looking at last season. Played just 3 games. Week 1, 2, and 5 were the games that he was available for. And he's second on the team in end zone targets despite playing only 3 games, just 1 less end zone target than Calvin Ridley. And on the season, he's actually 25th in the entire league. Again, only playing 3 games. He's on pace to have, over the span of the 3 games, with projecting it out the rest of the season, he's on pace to see, I believe, close to 15 end zone targets, which is super, super valuable. I mean, scoring touchdowns is everything in fantasy football. And this is something he did last season. He was 7th in the league last season in end zone targets. You want to see those opportunities, and Jones was getting those when he was available. And even in week 1, we actually saw Zay Jones staying on the field and Christian Kirk coming off the field to keep Zay Jones on the field when they were running in 12 personnel and running 2 wide receiver sets. So I think that's a good sign for Jones. I think the team loves him. I think Doug Peterson loves him. I think he's an important target for Trevor Lawrence in the red zone. His size as well. Definitely got more size and length than guys like Christian Kirk and like Calvin Ridley. Evan Ingram has not been as involved in the end zone or in the red zone and in the end zone as you might have thought from the traditional tight end perspective. Once Jones is back to in between the 20s, he's a guy that has a pretty decent average depth of target, over 13 yards, just narrowly behind Ridley, who's 13.6. He's 13.3. So we could see some quality opportunity when it comes to downfield targets, and then as well in the end zone, which is 2 really important things for me in fantasy. And again, like while he's been gone, it's not like we've seen Calvin Ridley absolutely dominate in this offense. So I'm excited to see what Jones can do when he's back. He's not someone I'm immediately starting. I do want to see if his role is very similar to what he's had in the early parts of the season, but I think he'll be back this week, and that's going to make him someone that next week everybody's going to want to target. You can get it on a week early. Now we move to a couple of running backs. I want to start with Tai Chandler, who's currently 1% rostered, so he's available in pretty much all of your fantasy leagues right now. Cam Akers, season loss to yet another torn Achilles. Brutal for him. Out with his second team too with the Vikings. It'll be really, really tough for him to get back into the league. But Alexander Mattison, with the opportunity he's been given this season, has been just absolutely atrocious. 3.6 yards per carry, 45th amongst running backs, 2.43 yards after contact per touch, 47th amongst running backs. He's got a stuff rate of 21.3%, which is 36th amongst running backs. So the stuff rate is plays that are hit or that result in a gain of 0 or less than 0. So again, very, very brutal there. And then he's got 3 breakaway runs, which are runs of 15 plus yards, and a breakaway run rate of just 2.8%, which is 35th at the position. There is just nothing of quality here with Mattison. And I would anticipate when you look at the addition of bringing in Akers, the team's not too happy with the performance and they want to see some other backs involved. Chandler took a back seat once Akers came to the team, and I think he's going to get his opportunity as the RB2 here for this team. They can't afford to see Mattison used as a bell cow with his performance. And Chandler, with his limited opportunity, he's had just 8 carries on the year, but he has already had 2 of them go for 10 plus yards. So he is capable of generating some explosive plays. And Chandler was a capable pass catcher in college at North Carolina and at Tennessee. So I know he can get out there and run some routes and contribute there. But we also look at an offense that's moving forward without Kirk Cousins and now goes to Josh Dobbs at QB. Like they're going to be leaning on their passing attack far, far less moving forward for the rest of the season. And I'm looking at their games throughout the rest of the year, and 4 of their final 7 games are against teams that are bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed to running backs. So there is a little bit of opportunity here for the matchups to be pretty decent, and for Chandler to have a realistic chance of earning the RB1 spot in this offense, which we can't say about a lot of running backs right now, especially the ones that are on your waiver wire. Okay, the last player you definitely want to hear about and are probably waiting to hear about, Keat Mitchell of the Baltimore Ravens. Look, we are at week 10 in the fantasy football season. I don't care if you are 0-9 so far, if you are middle of the pack, or if you are the top dog in your fantasy league. This is a guy to spend all of your FAAB on. At this point in the year, especially if you're in a 12, 14-team league, the waiver wire has absolutely nothing to get excited about. Do you want to add Antonio Gibson, Jerick McKinnon, or Rico Dowdle off the wire next week when you miss out on Keat Mitchell? No, these guys have just no situation. It's just completely injury dependent that their involvement in the offense will improve. For Keat Mitchell, there is a realistic opportunity for him to be the number 1 back in this offense, the highest rushing volume team in the NFL. The only thing that's wrong with Mitchell right now would be I don't think it's realistic to see him as their guy inside the 5, on the goal line, converting a bunch of touchdowns. That's likely Edwards' role. That's basically what Edwards' role was this past week against the Seahawks. And for me, a lot of this comes down to what I've seen from Mitchell. I remember seeing him a couple weeks ago for just one carry. And he broke a couple of tackles, turned it into like 11, 12-yard game. I'm like, wow, this kid looks very, very good. And then he pulled his hamstring on that play, never touched the field again in that game. So he's been someone a little bit on the radar because the team has wanted to play him, but he just hasn't been healthy. And obviously that's going to be a concern moving forward. Like, is he going to be able to stay on the field if he gets more opportunity? But watching him play, just super explosive. He was a sub 4.40 guy in the combine. He has forced a ton of missed tackles. Like, you look at his stat line. He went 9 carries for 138 yards and a touchdown, had the big 60-yard run. He had 3 rushes of 10-plus yards in this game. He had 8 missed tackles forced on 9 carries. If you look at some of the best running backs when it comes to the most missed tackles forced on the season, the best guys have like 30% of their carries they're forcing a missed tackle. Like this is we're talking about almost 100% of his carries he forced a missed tackle. So very exciting when you look at what he's capable of doing with the opportunity he gets, if it is a limited opportunity. But there is, of course, the offense that's running the ball in 51.6% of plays. That is the highest rate in the NFL. They're running the ball over 33 times a game, which is the second most in the league. Look, this is the time of year where we talked about early on in the season, spend your FAAB. You don't need to save it for late in the season because you get into the situation we're in right now, which is just a complete and utter shit show of garbage on your waiver wire at the running back position. Right now, you have a potential stud. If you have a decent amount of FAAB, look, pay attention to what other guys in your league have. Is everybody spent the majority of their FAAB? Do you have the most in the league? Obviously, don't spend it all if you have the most in the league, but spend whatever is necessary to get this guy. I'm absolutely sure I want to do this at this point because, again, the only thing you're going to regret about this is if somebody gets hurt and you didn't have enough to pick up a handcuff. But we don't want to play our fantasy season based off the hope of someone getting hurt and you being able to take advantage on the wire. This is someone that you're seeing it happen. He looks very, very good, and this is a valuable offense to get a piece of that's operating at a very, very high level right now. So I love Keat Mitchell. Obviously the number 1 ad this week. All right, those are my 5 favorite ads for this week on the Fantasy Football Waiver Wire in Week 10. Guys, if you have any questions about these players or any guys that I haven't talked about that you do want to hear about, again, I'm looking at guys here that you realistically can add. If Zach Charbonnet's on your wire, definitely add him. If there's players, I'm sure there's some around that 40+% mark. There are better ads than some of these guys I talked about. When I want to talk about players you really realistically can add. So if you have any questions about others, definitely drop those down below in the comments. Appreciate you guys for watching. Would love if you hit that like button for me, and we will see you on the next one.